Okay guys, we've been kind of covering all the pulse rifles that got buffed in 2.6.0.1. Today, we're going to be covering pulse rifles that are in the rapid fire archetype. Things like Horus Lease, Claws of the Wolf, Outlast, as well as a static roll rapid fire pulse rifle that was one of the best weapons in year 1, Darkest Before, which surprisingly is pretty good even in this sandbox despite it not having random rolls. Today guys, we're going to go over a few rolls on my pulse rifles, which one performed the best, and why you should give rapid fire pulse rifles another chance. So first up, the buff that affected rapid fire pulses was actually a damage buff overall, essentially going from 21.4 per crit to 23.8 and 13 per body to 14. The weapon overall has gotten a lot more forgiving, and that was like one of the things working against rapid fire pulse rifles for such a long time was their lack of forgiveness. They had an excellent TTK value at 0.8 seconds. The problem is they required all crits. Now the TTK value has not really changed much. It's still 0.8 seconds, but now instead of requiring all 3 bursts to be all crits, now it simply requires 7 crits and 2 body. That added forgiveness is what puts it in line though with the Clever Dragon meta, which was the pulse rifle meta that affected year 3 of Destiny 1, and it was one of the most dominant metas in the game. It wasn't until Clever Dragon was actually lifted out of its TTK value of 0.8 seconds to somewhere around 0.83 that people finally quit using it. But before that, it was such a dominant meta that Clever Dragon was actually closely associated to the dominance that Last Word had in year 1 of Destiny 1, aka it was nasty, boys. Beyond nasty. Now, are rapid fire pulse rifles with this change in damage, are they reaching the levels that Clever Dragon reach? And if they are, why are we not seeing more rapid fire pulse rifles being used? So first, let's go over damage fall off and when it normally begins on most of these rapid fire pulse rifles. So most rapid fire pulse rifles that have a range stat of somewhere around 50 to 55 starts to experience damage fall off at the 34 meter mark. Now surprisingly enough, if you happen to have one of these rapid fire pulse rifles with the perk Rangefinder, but it has poor range stats, say for instance this Horus Lease here that has only 41 range, because of Rangefinder and the boost there in magnification, damage fall off for this weapon doesn't really start until about 36 meters, which is incredible considering that it just tapped on an extra 2 meters despite it having 14 less range than my Outlast roll right here, which makes us wonder if we had like a max range pulse rifle, whether it's Horus Lease, Outlast, or Claws of the Wolf, in combination with Rangefinder, what ranges could we get up to? We've established yesterday with Redrix that damage fall off on that weapon, at least a max range Redrix, starts at about 42.5 meters. And this is the same case with all pulse rifles. They're pretty consistent in regards to their range stat and their damage fall off. 140 and 150 round per minute hand cannons are the only one that gets kind of twisted there, as the range stat does not necessarily equate to more range. It does, but it depends on the archetype of hand cannons. That's not the case with pulse rifles. They're very much consistent, so more range, the better. And if you got Rangefinder, well, that's even better. And if you got Rangefinder and max range, well, that's the best. So we got the lethality here of what Clever Dragon had back in D1. We've also got pretty decent range considering that most hand cannons can't fight outside of 30 meters. So things like rapid fire pulse rifles can be pretty dominant between that 25 to 40 meter range, which considering most of our maps, that's pretty much everywhere. But why don't we see more rapid fire pulse rifles? I really think it's because not many people have a god roll of one of these weapons. You see, Clever Dragon got so popular because when the second Iron Banner rolled around, a god roll was being presented to us by Lord Saladin. So of course everybody had the god roll by that point, which resulted in everyone using it. Not many people have taken the time to farm a god roll Outlast, or to farm a god roll Horus Lease, or even Claws of the Wolf for that matter. So which one of these pulse rifles, and I have a number of them and they all are pretty decently rolled. None of them I would say is god roll. Unfortunately, the god roll Horus Lease that I had with Rangefinder, moving target, and ricochet rounds was left on my PC only account, which is super unfortunate. But in terms of the best pulse rifle, in terms of feel, out of all of these, where is it at? Hands down guys, in this sandbox, a god roll of any of these pulse rifles is going to serve you just right. And like we said, even Darkest Before with its static roll is going to do good for you. But if you want to go the extra mile to farm a perfect roll, to have a pulse rifle on you at all times that will dominate, Horus Lease is the one I would invest more time into, which I understand not many Crucible dedicated players is going to go into the Corrupted Strike to farm for a pulse rifle. But Horus Lease on every facet outperforms these other pulses. Base stats are better rolls, and a lot of this gameplay is not even a God roll Horus Lease. This is the curator roll, which is not a bad roll, but if you were to take that same pulse rifle and slap on something like rangefinder and moving target, I'm telling you guys, you can really start to get into some insane ranges, creeping into those pulse rifle territories that only high impact pulses and aggressive pulse rifles usually thrive at, but still maintain that 0.8 second TTK value throughout all of it. The biggest shining factor though to these rapid fire pulse rifles is its dueling capabilities. It is a spamtastic weapon. You're literally just overwhelming targets with the sheer amount of ammunition that is being expended by this weapon type. And to me, rangefinder is such a good perk here to have on pretty much any of these pulse rifles. So guys, that is rapid fire pulse rifles. They are in a good spot. They reward more aggressive players, and out of all of these, Horus Lease to me is the best one. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.